Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Chloe and this is my story. When my sister and I got into the same university, I thought we'd be in it together. Instead, my parents sat me down and told me they would be paying for her entire education, but not mine. Their exact words. She deserved it, but you didn't. This story is about what happens when the people who are supposed to be your biggest supporters become your biggest obstacle. It's about the true cost of being underestimated and the incredible power you find when you decide to invest in yourself. More than anything, it's about that one perfect moment on graduation day when the truth was finally revealed, and I got to watch the color drain from my parents' faces. If you're ready for a story about household revenge, family secrets, and hard-won success, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss a single part. I'd love to see where you're all reading from. Let me know what city you're from in the comments below. The air in our living room was thick with the scent of lemon polish and unspoken sentences. It was a Sunday afternoon in late May, the kind of lazy, sun-drenched day that belonged on a postcard. Outside, the world was celebrating the promise of summer. Inside, I was being sentenced. My father sat in his worn leather armchair, a throne from which he issued decrees both business and domestic. He steepled his fingers, a gesture I'd seen him use 1,000 times with underlings at his firm. It was his "I'm being rational, so you can't be emotional" pose. My mother was perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands clutching a throw pillow like a life raft. Her expression was one of pained sympathy, a carefully constructed mask she wore whenever she had to deliver bad news that she fundamentally agreed with. And then there was Bella, my sister, sitting beside her. My Irish twin, born just 11 months after me. We had the same dark hair, the same wide-set eyes, but life had chiseled our faces into different shapes. Hers was open and bright, accustomed to praise. Mine, I was beginning to realize, was guarded, braced for impact. She stared at a spot on the oriental rug, her discomfort a silent, useless ally. On the mantelpiece above the fireplace, a curated history of our lives played out in silver frames. Bella at her ballet recital, a tiny, triumphant swan. Bella winning the middle school science fair, a ribbon pinned to her blazer. Bella beaming in her prom queen sash. My photos were there too, but they felt like afterthoughts. Me squinting into the sun on a family vacation. Me one face in a crowd on the soccer team. It was a shrine to a star and her less luminous satellite. "Chloe," my father began, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Your mother and I have had a long discussion about the fall. About college." I nodded, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. We'd all gotten our acceptance letters months ago. Me and Bella, both into state university. It had been a point of celebration, a moment of rare, shared victory. 2 daughters at the same great school, my dad had boomed over dinner. Now I saw how naive I had been to believe we would be treated as equals. "We've analyzed the financials," he continued, as if he were discussing a corporate merger. "Tuition, room and board, books. It's a significant expenditure. A major investment." "A very major investment," my mother echoed softly, her eyes pleading with me to understand. "And like any investment, we need to ensure the best possible return," Dad said. He leaned forward, his gaze direct and unyielding. "We've decided to fully fund Bella's education." A wave of relief, so sharp and immediate it almost made me gasp, washed over me. He'd said Bella's. He hadn't said "not yours." Maybe it was a 2-part announcement. That's great," I managed, looking at my sister. Bella offered a small, watery smile, her eyes still fixed on the floor. Waited. The silence stretched, pulling taut. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked, each second a tiny hammer blow. I looked from my father's impassive face to my mother's strained one. "And me," finally whispered. The words felt fragile like glass. My mother was the one who spoke, her voice oozing a kind of therapeutic cruelty. "Honey, we think this will be a good opportunity for you. A chance to build character." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "Build character? We'll co-sign for the loans, of course," my father cut in, waving a dismissive hand. But you'll be responsible for them. It's important for you to have some skin in the game. To learn the value of $1. The room began to feel small, the air thin. The logic was a tangled, impossible knot. Bella wouldn't have to learn the value of $1. Bella didn't need character. The questions swirled in my head, but I couldn't form them. All I could manage was a single wounded word. Why? My father sighed, a sound of deep disappointment, as if my simple question was a personal failing. Chloe, let's be honest. Bella has always been more focused. Her grades were consistently higher. Her extracurriculars were more impressive. She applied for the honors college. You drifted a bit. I played soccer for 4 years, I said, my voice trembling. I volunteered at the hospital. Those are hobbies, dear, my mother said gently. Bella's work with the debate club, being treasurer of the student council, that shows leadership. It shows commitment. 'Twas a lie. A carefully crafted narrative they had repeated so many times they believed it. My grades were a fraction of a point behind Bella's. My activities were just different, not lesser. But they had already made their judgment. They had chosen their winner. I looked at Bella, begging her with my eyes to say something. To say, that's not fair. To say, we're in this together. But she just sank deeper into the sofa cushions, a beautiful silent coward. That's when my father delivered the final, fatal blow. He stood up, signaling the end of the discussion, and placed a hand on Bella's shoulder. She deserved it, he said, his voice ringing with a conviction that left no room for appeal. He then looked at me, his eyes cold and appraising. But you didn't earn it. He said it so simply. She deserved it. You didn't. It wasn't an opinion. It was a fact, a fundamental truth of our family, laid bare in the polite, sunlit confines of our living room. My mother nodded in solemn agreement. In that moment, they weren't just denying me tuition. They were denying my worth. They were telling me that my 18 years of existence had been weighed, measured, and found wanting. The love I had for them, a thing I had always assumed was as solid and unconditional as the foundation of our house, suddenly felt like a fraud. It fractured, and a cold, hard resolve began to seep into the cracks. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't scream. I would not give them the satisfaction. I simply nodded, the motion stiff and robotic, and stood up. Okay, I said, the single word hanging in the air like a puff of smoke. I understand. I turned and walked out of the room, each tick of the grandfather clock marking my retreat. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew with absolute certainty that I was now on my own. My childhood bedroom wasn't a sanctuary. It was a museum of my second-place status. It was smaller than Bella's, overlooking the neighbor's noisy air-conditioning unit while hers faced the quiet, manicured garden. The paint was a generic beige, a neutral color Mom had chosen, while Bella's had been a custom-ordered robin's egg blue. Lying on my bed, the echo of my father's words, "You didn't earn it," ricocheted off the walls. This wasn't a new development. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being half-loved. The memories came flooding back, not as gentle waves but as a single, crushing tsunami. I was 15 again, on the eve of my 16th birthday. Bella's Sweet 16, held a year prior, had been the event of the season. A catered affair in our backyard with a DJ, a dance floor, and at least 50 of her closest friends. The grand finale had been the unveiling of her present, a brand-new cherry-red Honda Civic, a ridiculously large bow tied around it. My father had tossed her the keys with a flourish, saying, "For our responsible, driven girl." My 16th birthday was a quiet dinner at a local Italian restaurant. Just the 4 of us. When we got home, my present was waiting on the kitchen table. It was a slim envelope. Inside was a preloaded city bus pass and a crisp $100 bill. "Happy birthday, honey," my mother had said, kissing my cheek. "We thought this would be more practical for you." "A car is a huge responsibility," Dad added, not looking up from his newspaper. "This will teach you independence. How to manage your time." I remember the hot flush of shame, the desperate attempt to arrange my face into a grateful smile. I'd mumbled my thanks while Bella watched, her expression a mix of pity and relief. She had the car. I had a lesson in time management. She was driven, I was taught independence. It was the same logic, the same infuriating coded language they used to justify the inequity. The summer I turned 17, the pattern repeated itself, this time with our futures in mind. Bella, a budding artist, had her heart set on a prestigious 6-week art program in Vermont. The tuition was thousands of dollars. Without hesitation, my parents paid it. "You have to nurture a gift like hers," I overheard my mom telling a friend on the phone. "It's an investment in her talent." That same week, I'd mentioned wanting to volunteer for a trail building project in a national park. It was unpaid, but the experience would be invaluable for my interest in environmental science. My father had scoffed. "Volunteering? Chloe, you need to think about the real world. You need a job. You need to learn what a hard day's work feels like." So, while Bella spent her summer painting idyllic landscapes and networking with college art professors, I spent mine at the local grocery store. Better buys. My hard day's work consisted of bagging groceries, corralling shopping carts from the sun-baked parking lot, and cleaning up mysterious spills in aisle 3. The smell of sawdust and turpentine from Bella's art supplies was replaced by the cloying scent of overripe melons and industrial floor cleaner. When Bella came home, her portfolio was full of stunning charcoal sketches and vibrant watercolors. My parents had them professionally framed. I came home with calloused hands and a paycheck for minimum wage, most of which I was encouraged to put into a savings account for my future. Sitting there in my beige room, the memories didn't just sting, they clarified. This wasn't about money. It was about narrative. In the story my parents told themselves, Bella was the prodigy, the thoroughbred, the sure bet. Every dollar and every ounce of praise they gave her was an investment, destined to pay dividends of pride. I was the reclamation project, the scrappy mutt who needed to be taught lessons through hardship. My successes were flukes. My struggles were character building. The verdict delivered in the living room wasn't a punishment. It was a policy statement, the final confirmation of a corporate family structure where I had been permanently assigned to the mailroom. And as the initial shock subsided, it was replaced by a cold, quiet anger. They thought struggle was my destiny. They thought hardship was my teacher. Fine. Let them. They had written me out of their success story, so I would write my own. And I swore to myself in the silence of that room, that one day they would have to read it. Freshman year at State University was not the glossy, brochure-ready experience my parents were funding for Bella. It was a frantic, exhausting blur, a relentless marathon I ran on too little sleep and too much caffeine. My life was a grim equation. 15 credit hours plus 40 hours of work equals 0 social life and a constant, bone-deep weariness. My first job was the 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. shift at the Greasy Spoon, a diner just off campus that catered to truckers and students pulling all-nighters. I'd jolt awake to my alarm at 5:15, the darkness outside my dorm window still absolute. I'd pull on my grease-stained uniform and walk the silent streets, my mind already calculating the day's hurdles. The diner was a sensory assault. The sizzle of bacon, the hiss of the coffee machine, the sticky film on the tables that never quite went away. I learned to balance 3 plates on one arm and smile through condescending remarks from customers who saw my name tag. Not me. I'd rush from my last table straight to my 10:30 intro to psychology class, smelling faintly of fried onions and regret. My second job was in the university library, a stark contrast to the diner's chaos. From 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 4 nights a week, I worked in the stacks. It was a silent, sterile world of fluorescent lights and the hushed whisper of turning pages. My job was to shelve returned books, a Sisyphean task that sent me walking miles through labyrinthine corridors. I'd push a squeaking metal cart, my back aching from my morning shift, my eyes gritty with fatigue. It paid less than the diner, but it was quiet. Sometimes I'd find a hidden corral, sit for 5 minutes, and lean my head against the cold metal shelf, just to feel the world stop spinning. My third job was the most isolating. It was a remote gig I'd found on a university job board, transcribing audio files for a doctoral candidate in the physics department. From 11 p.m. until I physically couldn't keep my eyes open, I'd sit at my tiny desk, headphones on, typing out lectures filled with terms like quantum entanglement and space-time continuum. My own calculus textbook lay open beside me, its equations looking like an alien language my exhausted brain couldn't decipher. This was my college experience. A grueling triathlon of labor, punctuated by classes I was often too tired to fully absorb. My diet consisted of stale diner toast, instant ramen, and the crackers I'd swipe from the library break room. Meanwhile, I saw Bella's college experience unfold in vibrant, effortless color on my phone screen. Her Instagram was a curated gallery of joy. Bella and her sorority sisters, arms linked, wearing matching big/little t-shirts. Bella at a tailgate party, her face painted with the university logo, a red Solo cup in her hand. Bella in a stunning formal gown, posing with her handsome fraternity boyfriend before some themed gala. One night, the contrast was particularly brutal. It was 1 a.m. I had a midterm in the morning I hadn't studied for, a 10-page stack of books to shelve waiting for me in my mind, and a 30-minute audio file on string theory to finish. I was eating dry cereal out of a coffee mug when I made the mistake of opening my phone. The latest post was a picture of Bella with a group of friends, clinking champagne flutes on a restaurant patio. The caption read, "Celebrating the end of midterms. So deserved. #college life #blessed. Deserved." There was that word again. I looked from the glowing screen to my own reflection in the dark window of my dorm room. I saw a pale, gaunt girl with dark circles under her eyes, her hair scraped back in a messy bun. I felt a surge of bitterness so intense it tasted like acid in my throat. I wasn't blessed. I was burdened. And the people who were supposed to love me most were the ones who had strapped the weight to my back. I clicked my phone off, the image of Bella's smiling face burning behind my eyes. The weight wasn't just the jobs or the classes. It was the crushing, ever-present knowledge that just a few dorms away, my own sister was living the life that should have been, at least partially, mine. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late October. It arrived not with a bang, but with a sterile, terrifyingly polite email from the university's bursar's office. The subject line was simple: urgent, past due balance on student account. My heart seized. I'd been juggling payments, robbing Peter to pay Paul, using my diner tips to cover textbooks and my library paycheck to cover the next installment on my loan. But I'd miscalculated. A late fee had been added, and now the entire balance for the semester was officially overdue. The email stated that if it wasn't paid within 10 business days, a hold would be placed on my account, preventing me from registering for spring classes. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my chronic exhaustion. Dropping out, the very fear I'd been running from for 2 months, was no longer a vague threat. It was a date on a calendar. For 3 days, I lived in a state of quiet terror. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus in class. The numbers swam in my head. There was no way I could earn enough in 10 days. I had no one else to ask. My pride, the one thing I had been clinging to, felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. So, with my hands trembling, I did the one thing I swore I would never do. Called home. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, planning to be calm, logical, and non-accusatory. I would present it as a simple cash flow problem, not a crisis of their making. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Chloe, what a nice surprise." "Hey, Mom," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is now a good time? I just have a quick question about something." "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. So, I ran into a bit of a snag with the tuition payment. It's just a timing thing with my paychecks and when the bill was due, and they've added a late fee, and now I'm worried about registering for the spring semester. I let the words tumble out, trying to downplay the desperation clinging to every syllable. There was a pause on the other end. I could practically hear her assembling the mask of pained sympathy. "Oh, honey, that sounds stressful. Are you managing your money properly?" "I'm trying, Mom. I'm working almost 40 hours a week. It's just a lot to handle all at once. I see, she said, her tone shifting from concern to that familiar therapeutic disappointment. Well, your father and I believe that facing these kinds of challenges is part of the learning process. My stomach tightened. I know, but this is different. This could stop me from continuing. I just thought maybe you could help me cover this one payment, and I can pay you back as soon as I can. Oh, I don't know, Chloe, she began, and then her voice suddenly brightened, seizing on a distraction. Oh, speaking of school, you will not believe the news I have about Bella. The pivot was so swift it gave me vertigo. Before I could protest, she launched into a breathless story about how Bella's sorority, Kappa Kappa Gamma, had just held their elections. Bella had been voted in as the new social chair. Isn't that just wonderful? My mother gushed. She'll be in charge of planning all their formals and mixers. It's such a huge responsibility. She's really thriving, making all the right connections. Her father is so proud. It just goes to show we made the right investment. The word investment was like a slap in the face. I stood in the hallway of my dorm, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the static-filled silence between her words. She was talking about party planning as a sign of success, while I was fighting to just stay enrolled. The chasm between our two worlds had never felt so vast or so cruel. When she finally finished her monologue about Bella's bright future, she seemed to remember I was still on the line. Oh, anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, your money troubles. Listen, honey, just create a budget. Be resourceful. You'll figure it out. The condescension was suffocating. She had no interest in my reality. She had already slotted me into my role in the family drama, the struggling child. And she was going to let me play the part. Okay, Mom, I said, my voice flat and lifeless. The fight had gone out of me, replaced by a cold, desolate certainty. We love you, sweetie, she said, her voice dripping with sincerity that felt utterly fake. Just try to keep up, honey. Just try to keep up. I didn't say goodbye. I ended the call and slid down the hallway wall until I was sitting on the floor. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. She was right. Couldn't keep up. Bella was on a paved, well-lit superhighway, and I was clawing my way up a gravel embankment in the dark. And my parents weren't just watching from the roadside. They were the ones who had pushed me off the road in the first place. A few days after the soul-crushing phone call, I walked into my Econ 101 lecture feeling like a ghost. I'd managed to get a short-term extension from the bursar's office after a humiliating, near-sobbing plea, but it only delayed the execution by a few weeks. The cloud of impending failure hung over me, making it impossible to focus. I sat in the back of the large lecture hall, a notebook open to a blank page, my mind a million miles away. The professor was Dr. Anya Sharma. She was a small, sharp woman with intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She taught with a fiery passion that was both intimidating and magnetic. Today, her lecture was on resource allocation and systemic inequality. Standard models suggest that resources flow to where they can be most efficiently utilized, she said, pacing the stage. But this often ignores a crucial human factor: perceived worth. Who decides what, or who, is a worthy investment? And what happens to the potential that is overlooked because it doesn't fit a preconceived notion of success? Her words struck me with the force of a physical blow. She was narrating my life. She posed a question to the hall of 300 students. Imagine two identical seeds. One is planted in a state-of-the-art greenhouse with perfect soil, automated watering, and optimal sunlight. The other is tossed onto a patch of rocky, neglected ground. When the first seed flourishes and the second struggles, do we credit the inherent quality of the seed, or the quality of the environment we provided? A few students offered textbook answers about environmental factors and opportunity, but I felt a fire ignite in my gut, a blaze fueled by months of injustice. My hand shot up before I even realized what I was doing. Dr. Sharma's eyes scanned the cavernous room and landed on me. Yes, in the back. I stood up, my heart pounding. The problem with the analogy, I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I expected, is that we're not seeds. We're people. And people are aware of the greenhouse. The person in the rocky soil knows they've been neglected. They see the other person thriving with every advantage, and they are told it's because they are inherently better. The neglect isn't just a lack of resources. It's a psychological burden. It's a message that you are not worth the good soil. The hall was silent. I had taken an academic hypothetical and made it deeply personal. I felt a flush of embarrassment, worried I had overstepped. But Dr. Sharma wasn't looking at me with disapproval. She was looking at me with an intense, appraising curiosity. "That is an exceptionally incisive point," she said slowly. "The demoralizing effect of perceived underinvestment. Excellent. Please see me after class." I spent the rest of the lecture in a daze. When the class was dismissed, I packed my bag with trembling hands and made my way to the front of the hall. "I don't know your name," Dr. Sharma said, her tone direct. "Chloe. Chloe Matthews." "Well, Chloe Matthews, that was one of the most astute observations I've heard from an undergraduate in a long time," she said, leaning against the lectern. She looked me over, and for the first time I felt truly seen. She saw the cheap, worn-out jeans, the exhaustion in my eyes, the desperation I tried so hard to hide. But she didn't offer pity. She offered something far better, respect. "You have a mind for this," she stated. "You cut through the academic jargon and get to the human truth. I'm looking for a new research assistant. The work is mostly data analysis, literature reviews. It's not glamorous, but it pays $15 an hour, for 10 to 15 hours a week." I stared at her, speechless. $15 an hour was almost double what I made at the library. It was enough. It was the answer. It was a lifeline. "The work is demanding," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "I expect the best from my assistants. I only invest my time and my grant money in students I believe will provide a significant return." Her choice of words was deliberate, a perfect, unintentional echo of my father's toxic logic. But she had twisted it, reclaimed it, and turned it into something powerful. He had used it to discard me. She was using it to choose me. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back fiercely. I would not cry. This was not a moment for weakness. It was a moment of alignment, of a door creaking open in a wall I thought was solid brick. "I can start tomorrow," I said, my voice thick with emotion but firm with resolve. Dr. Sharma smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile. "Good. Welcome aboard, Chloe. Let's see what that mind of yours can really do when it's given some decent soil." Working for Dr. Anya Sharma was like stepping from a dimly lit room into a brilliantly lit laboratory. The world didn't change, but my ability to see it did. The job was not easy. My first week was a humbling exercise in my own ignorance. Dr. Sharma tasked me with organizing a dataset from a longitudinal study on economic mobility. It was a sprawling spreadsheet with thousands of entries, riddled with inconsistencies and cryptic variables. My brain, accustomed to the simple transactions of the diner and the rote memorization of textbooks, recoiled. For 2 days I struggled, my frustration mounting. I was terrified that she'd made a mistake, that the sharp mind she thought she'd seen in the lecture hall was a fluke. On the 3rd day, she found me staring at the screen, my face a mask of defeat. She didn't offer sympathy. She pulled up a chair. "What's the narrative here, Chloe?" she asked, pointing a pen at the screen. "Data isn't just numbers. It's a collection of stories. What story are these numbers trying to tell you?" It was a revelation. I had been trying to conquer the data, to wrestle it into submission. She was asking me to listen to it. We spent the next hour sifting through the columns, not as a chore, but as an act of interpretation. She showed me how to spot patterns, how to isolate outliers, how to ask the right questions. Under her guidance, the spreadsheet transformed from an enemy into a language. By the end of the week, I had not only cleaned the dataset, but I had also drafted a 2-page summary of preliminary findings that she called surprisingly insightful. That was how she taught. She didn't give answers, she provided frameworks. Our weekly meetings became the anchor of my life. She'd hand me a dense academic paper saying, "Tear this apart. Find the flaw in the author's reasoning." And I would spend the next 2 days doing just that, feeling my own mind sharpen against the whetstone of established theory. I quit the diner and then the library. The 15 hours a week I spent as her research assistant, combined with my now meager student loans, were enough to keep me afloat. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was learning. One afternoon, she slid a flyer across her desk. It was for the Dean's Merit Scholarship, a small but significant grant awarded to students who demonstrated both academic excellence and financial need. "Your grades from last semester were excellent," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "You should apply." "I don't know," I hesitated, the old voice of my father echoing in my head. "You didn't earn it. My GPA is good, but is it that good?" Dr. Sharma leaned back in her chair, her gaze piercing. "Chloe, stop waiting for other people to tell you what you're worth. The application asks for an essay on an economic challenge you've personally faced. I suspect you'll have no shortage of material." She tapped the flyer. "Write the essay. I'll help you edit it. Show them what you showed me." So I wrote. I wrote about the psychological burden of being deemed a poor investment. I wrote about the crushing weight of balancing work and school, not as a plea for pity, but as a case study in resilience. Dr. Sharma helped me polish it, trimming away the emotion and leaving only the hard, undeniable facts of my struggle and my success. 2 weeks later, an email informed me I'd been awarded the scholarship. It was $3,000. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was freedom. It was a semester's worth of books. It was a month where I wouldn't have to worry about rent. It was a secret victory, a warm, glowing coal I held in my chest. I told no one but Dr. Sharma. It was the first piece of my new life, a life I was building for myself, completely separate from the story my family had written for me. The divide between my two lives became jarringly clear when I went home for Thanksgiving. On campus, I was no longer the exhausted girl from the back of the class. I was Dr. Sharma's research assistant, a sophomore who classmates sought out to lead study groups for advanced economics courses. I was becoming confident, articulate, and respected in my small academic circle. I walked into my parents' house feeling for the first time like I had something to be proud of. The feeling evaporated the moment I stepped through the door. "There she is," my mother chirped, giving me a quick, air-light hug before turning her full attention back to Bella, who was directing the placement of a new, expensive-looking piece of art on the wall. "Chloe, honey, look what Bella bought. It's from a student artist at her gallery showing. Isn't it stunning? She has such an eye." The entire weekend was a performance piece with Bella as the star. At dinner, my father grilled her on her classes, nodding approvingly. Good. A B in marketing is solid. It's all about networking anyway, and you're a natural at that." He turned to me, his fork halfway to his mouth. "So, Chloe, how's school?" "It's really good actually," I began, a flicker of hope igniting. "I'm working as a research assistant for one of my professors, and we're even starting work on a paper together about—" "Oh, that's nice, dear," my mother cut in, passing the mashed potatoes. "Bella, tell your father about the theme for the Kappa Winter Formal. It sounds absolutely divine." And just like that, the conversation was gone. My nascent success, the thing that felt so monumental to me, was dismissed as nice, and buried under an avalanche of details about ice sculptures and hors d'oeuvres. I spent the rest of the meal in silence, pushing food around my plate, a ghost at the feast. I was an accessory in their lives, a piece of furniture they acknowledged when they bumped into it. The most painful moment came on Friday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, trying to find a quiet corner to read a paper Dr. Sharma had assigned. My dad walked in, beaming, with a local newspaper in his hand. "Look at this," he announced to my mom, pointing to a photo in the society section. It was a picture from a university fundraising gala. Bella stood in the background, smiling vaguely behind a local city councilman. She wasn't named in the caption, but my father acted as if she'd won a Nobel Prize. Right there, he said proudly. She's learning how to move in the right circles. That's the real education. That's our investment paying off. I looked from the blurry photo of my sister to the dense, complicated academic paper in my hands. The paper I was being paid to read. The paper that was stretching my mind and shaping my future. They were celebrating Bella's proximity to influence, while my actual, tangible achievements remained completely invisible to them, because I refused to beg them to see. It didn't even hurt anymore. It was just a fact. We lived in different worlds, and in theirs, I would always be the girl on the rocky soil. The irony was, I was finally starting to realize that the view from down here was much more interesting. The call came late on a Wednesday night in March. I was buried in my dorm room, surrounded by a fortress of books, cramming for a midterm in econometrics. The quantitative side of economics was still a struggle, and I was deep in a frustrating loop of regression analysis when my phone buzzed, casting a blue light across my desk. It was Bella. I almost ignored it. Our conversations since I'd started college had been superficial and strained. But it was after midnight, and an instinct I couldn't explain made me answer. "Hello, Chloe." Her voice was thick and slurred, a word stretched into 2 syllables. Behind her, I could hear the faint thumping of music. "Hey, Bella. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm in my room," she said, her voice cracking. A second later I heard a sob, wet and ragged. It's so much." My annoyance melted away, replaced by alarm. "What's so much? What's wrong?" "Everything," she wailed, the word raw with a pain I had never heard from her before. "This stupid social chair position. Do you know how much work it is? Everyone expects everything to be perfect. The girl's my boyfriend. Mom and Dad." She took a shaky breath. "They call every day. How are your grades? Are you making the right friends? Are you making our investment worthwhile?" That word again. Investment. Coming from her, it sounded like a curse. "They paid for all of this, Chloe," she continued, her words tumbling over each other in a drunken rush. "This beautiful room, these expensive clothes, these classes I'm barely passing. It's like I'm drowning in it. I have to be perfect all the time because if I'm not, then I'm just a failure. A really, really expensive failure." I sat in my own small Spartan room, listening to my golden child sister fall apart. For a moment I felt a grim satisfaction. But it was quickly replaced by a strange, aching pity. "At least you get to be you," she whispered, her voice full of a shocking, bitter envy. "You're just Chloe. If you mess up, it's just you messing up. Nobody's checking the stock price. But me. I'm their blue chip stock, and I feel like I'm about to crash." We stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes while she cried, a torrent of fears and insecurities pouring out of her. She confessed to cheating on a philosophy paper, to hating her marketing class, to feeling like her popular boyfriend was more of an accessory than a person. It was as if the perfect facade she had maintained for 20 years had finally cracked, revealing the terrified, unhappy girl underneath. "Don't tell them," she pleaded as the call wound down. "Don't tell Mom and Dad. Please." "I won't," I promised. "Get some sleep, Bella." The next morning I sent her a tentative text. "Hey, hope you're feeling better today. Call me if you want to talk." Her reply came back almost instantly. "I'm fine. Was just super drunk last night. Don't make it a thing." And just like that, the wall was back up. The crack was sealed over. The moment of raw honesty was reclassified as a drunken joke. It was the family way. Deny, dismiss, and pretend everything is perfect. But I couldn't forget what I'd heard. The facade was breakable. And for the first time, I understood that Bella wasn't my opposite. She was just another kind of victim, trapped in a gilded cage while I was learning to fly in an open field. By my junior year, my work with Dr. Sharma had become the central focus of my academic life. The paper we had been working on, an analysis of the long-term economic impact of underfunded arts programs in public schools, had gone through 7 drafts. Dr. Sharma was ruthless, pushing me to refine every sentence, challenge every assumption, and strengthen every conclusion. Finally, she deemed it ready. "We'll submit it to the American Economic Review," she announced one day, as if she were suggesting we grab a coffee. I stared at her. "The AER? Isn't that, like, the most prestigious economics journal in the country?" "It is," she said with a small smile. "And our research is good. Your contribution was significant, Chloe. You deserve co-authorship." The idea was so far beyond my wildest ambitions that I couldn't even process it. We submitted the paper, and I promptly tried to forget about it, convinced it would be rejected immediately. Life went on. I took more classes, my GPA climbed, and my secret scholarship fund grew. 3 months later, an email landed in my inbox with the subject line, "AER decision on manuscript #E19-742. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely click it open. I read the first line. "Dear Dr. Sharma and Ms. Matthews, it is our pleasure to accept your paper for publication." I shot out of my chair as if I'd been electrocuted. A wave of pure, unadulterated triumph washed over me. I ran out of my dorm and all the way across campus to Dr. Sharma's office, barging in without knocking. I held out my phone, unable to speak. She read the email, and her professional composure broke into a radiant smile. "I knew it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "I told you the work was good. This, Chloe, is a game changer." It was more than that. It was a validation so profound it almost brought me to my knees. A week later, Dr. Sharma called me into her office again. On her desk was a brochure, far more glossy and official-looking than the scholarship flyer from the year before. The university crest was embossed in gold at the top. "The Chancellor's Award for Undergraduate Excellence. It's the highest honor the university bestows upon a graduating senior," she explained, her voice serious. "It recognizes a student who has not only achieved the highest levels of academic success, but has done so in the face of significant challenges. The winner gets a substantial cash prize and delivers a speech at the main commencement ceremony." She slid an application form across the desk. "The publication of our paper makes you a very strong candidate. Perhaps the strongest." I looked at the form. It asked for transcripts, letters of recommendation, and a 5,000-word personal essay. A speech at graduation. In front of thousands of people. In front of my family. An image flashed in my mind. My parents' faces, beaming with pride for Bella, suddenly turning toward the stage to see me. To hear my story, told in my own words, on a platform they couldn't ignore or dismiss. The seed of a new idea, a revenge so total and so poetic it made my breath catch, began to germinate. "It's a long shot," I said, testing the words. "The best things always are," Dr. Sharma replied, her eyes knowing. "The question is, are you willing to do the work?" I spent the next month pouring every spare moment into that application. I gathered my transcripts, which now showed a nearly perfect GPA. I secured glowing letters of recommendation. And I wrote the essay. It was the hardest thing I had ever written. I wove together the story of my 3 jobs, the bursar's notice, the late-night calls with my sister, and the quiet triumphs in the library. I framed it not as a story of victimhood, but as the story of an investment. An investment I had made in myself against all odds, when no one else would. It was my secret history, my Declaration of Independence, and my application for a final public victory. I submitted it at 11:59 p.m. the night of the deadline, my heart pounding a frantic, hopeful rhythm. The waiting was a unique form of torture. For weeks, every time my phone buzzed with a new email, my stomach would lurch. Life continued in its new, manageable rhythm, but the question of the award was a constant hum beneath the surface of my days. I told myself it didn't matter, that getting the paper published was enough, that my own self-respect was the only prize worth having. It was a lie, but a necessary one. The email arrived on a rainy April afternoon. I was in the library, ironically shelving books in a section near where I used to work, a quiet reminder of how far I'd come. The subject line was unambiguous. A message from the office of the Chancellor. My hands felt clumsy and slick as I tapped it open. My eyes scanned the text, catching phrases. Distinguished Selection Committee. Pool of extraordinary candidates. It is with the utmost pleasure. And then the sentence that changed everything. That we inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Chancellor's Award for Undergraduate Excellence. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. A strange, profound calm settled over me. I read the email 3 more times, the words sinking in not with a splash, but with the slow, steady weight of a stone settling at the bottom of a lake. I had won. I stood up, walked out of the library into the soft spring rain, and let it wash over my face. The initial vengeful thought I'd had, "I can't wait to see their faces," flickered in my mind, but it felt distant now, like an echo from a former self. The victory was so much bigger than that. It wasn't about their humiliation anymore. It was about my vindication. This award wasn't something they could dismiss as nice. It wasn't a blurry photo in the society pages. It was the university's highest honor, an undeniable, objective measure of my worth. It was chosen by a committee of strangers who knew nothing of my family's narrative. They had looked at the facts of my life, the rocky soil and the struggling seed, and they had declared me the most impressive flower in the entire garden. The revenge wasn't in their future shock and shame. The revenge was in this moment right now. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had done it. I had built a life so successful and a future so bright that their validation, the thing I had once craved like oxygen, was now completely and utterly irrelevant. I walked to Dr. Sharma's office, the rain plastering my hair to my head. I didn't have to say a word. She saw it on my face. A slow, proud smile spread across her lips. "I knew it," she said softly. She stood up and gave me a rare, firm hug. "The best investments always pay off, Chloe. Always." I hugged her back, a deep sense of peace settling in my soul. I had won. And nobody in my family had a clue. The final act was yet to be written, but for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty who held the pen. The last weeks of my final semester passed in a surreal haze. On the surface, everything was normal. I wrote my final papers, took my exams, and packed my meager belongings into cardboard boxes. But underneath, a powerful current was pulling me toward a single day in May. I was living in the final chapter of my secret life, and the anticipation was a constant, thrilling hum beneath my skin. The official invitation to graduation, a heavy cardstock affair with a university crest embossed in gold, arrived for both me and Bella in the mail. This necessitated the phone call I had been simultaneously dreading and looking forward to. I dialed the familiar number, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum. "Chloe, I was just thinking about you," my mother's voice chirped, bright and oblivious. "We got the invitations. We are so excited for Bella's big day. I've already booked a reservation at the Clove Club for a celebration dinner. You'll come, of course." It wasn't a question. It was an assumption that I would happily participate in the coronation of my sister. "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice even. "I called to make sure you had the details. The ceremony for the College of Arts and Sciences is at 10 a.m. at the stadium." "Perfect. We'll be there with bells on. I'm having a dress tailored for the occasion. Do you think Bella should wear white? Or is that too much?" "I think she'd look angelic in white." "I'm sure she'd look great," I said, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. I was like an anthropologist observing a foreign tribe and its bizarre rituals. "It's just so wonderful that you're finishing up too, honey," she added, her voice taking on the tone one uses for a child who has successfully completed a coloring book. "It'll be so nice to have both our girls done with school. Your father is just bursting with pride for Bella. He's telling everyone at his firm that his daughter is graduating with honors." His daughter. Singular. The Freudian slip was so blatant, so perfectly revealing that I almost laughed. Bella was graduating cum laude, a respectable achievement. My transcript, which I had stared at just the night before, read summa cum laude, the highest possible distinction. It was a detail I chose to keep to myself. It would only get in the way of the story. "That's great, Mom," I said. I'll see you on Saturday then. We can't wait. We'll be there early to get good seats for Bella's moment. I hung up the phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. They were planning to attend a show, and I was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. They thought they had front-row seats to a predictable, happy play they had produced and directed. They had no idea they were sitting in the front row of a tragedy, and they were the lead actors. A week before graduation, I went to the campus bookstore to pick up my regalia. The gown was a flimsy polyester thing, smelling of plastic and factory dust. It felt cheap and anonymous, a uniform designed to make thousands of individuals look the same. I paid for it and tucked the bag under my arm. Just another graduating senior. My next stop was different. I went to a quiet, wood-paneled office on the top floor of the administration building, the office of the chancellor. A kind, older woman with a warm smile checked my name on a list. "Congratulations, Ms. Matthews," she said, her voice filled with genuine respect. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a flat, velvet-lined box. Inside, nestled on a bed of black satin, was the chancellor's medal. It was heavy, solid bronze, the university crest rendered in stunning high relief. It felt substantial in my palm, a physical manifestation of every brutal diner shift, every lonely night in the library, every academic battle won. She also handed me a set of honor cords. Not just the white cords for summa cum laude, but a thick, braided cord of brilliant gold and deep blue, the unique colors of a Chancellor's Award recipient. Back in my dorm room, I laid everything out on my bed. The cheap black gown, the simple white cords, and the magnificent heavy gold and blue cord with its gleaming metal. The contrast was stark. This was the story of my college career. The unremarkable surface, and the extraordinary unseen reality hidden just beneath. That night I wrote my speech. I didn't sit down to write a vengeful tirade. The anger I had once felt had cooled into something harder and clearer. Truth. I wasn't writing it for them anymore. I was writing it for the girl who had cried in the hallway after that phone call. I was writing it for every student in the stadium who felt overlooked, underestimated, or invisible. I started by writing about the two greenhouses, the analogy Dr. Sharma had used in class so long ago. I described what it felt like to be planted in rocky soil, to be told that your struggle was a result of your own inherent lack of worth. We are taught to celebrate the flower that blooms in the pristine greenhouse, I wrote, my pen flying across the page. We praise its beauty, its resilience, its success. But we rarely ask about the soil. We rarely question the advantages it was given. And what of the flower in the neglected patch of ground? The one that has to fight through rocks and weeds, that has to withstand drought and storm with no help. If it manages, against all odds, to grow, its bloom is not just a success. It is a miracle. It is a testament. And it is a lesson. Potential is not a limited resource, but it is often a deliberately ignored one. I crossed out sentences that felt bitter, replacing them with statements of fact. I wrote about resilience not as a burden, but as a hard-won skill. I wrote about finding support in unexpected places, a direct nod to Dr. Sharma. I wrote about the power of self-investment, of believing in your own worth when the world gives you every reason not to. By the time the sun rose, the speech was finished. It was 3 pages long. It was my truth, polished and sharpened into a weapon. Not a weapon of hate, but a weapon of illumination, designed to cast a light so bright it would incinerate every lie my family had ever told themselves. I folded the pages, tucked them into the box with my medal, and went to sleep, more peaceful than I had been in 4 years. The morning of graduation was a whirlwind of manufactured sentiment. I woke up early, showered, and dressed in silence. From Bella's room across the hall, I could hear the cheerful cacophony of my mother's fussing, the blast of a hairdryer, and exclamations of, "Oh, you look absolutely perfect." When I walked into the living room, a quiet observer in my simple black dress, the scene was exactly as I had pictured it. My father was on his knees, aiming his phone like a documentarian capturing a rare species. Bella stood in the center of the room, a vision in a white sundress, turning this way and that. Chin up, sweetie. That's it. A big, proud smile. Dad commanded. My mother stood by, clutching a travel-size can of hairspray like a holy scepter. Are you nervous, Bellaboo? Don't be nervous. This is your day. You've earned every second of this. They both turned as I entered, their smiles faltering for a microsecond. Oh, Chloe. You're ready, my mom said, her eyes quickly scanning my simple attire before immediately flicking back to Bella. Doesn't your sister look like a movie star? You look great, Bella, I said honestly. She did. She looked like the golden child she had always been, perfectly packaged for her moment of triumph. She gave me a quick, anxious smile, her eyes holding a flicker of something I couldn't decipher. Guilt, perhaps, or just the generalized stress of the day. The car ride to the university was an extension of the living room photo shoot. My parents, in the front seats, talked exclusively to Bella, reminiscing about her first day of kindergarten, her lead role in the middle school play, her student council victory. I was a silent passenger in the back, watching the familiar streets of our town slide by. I felt strangely calm, like an actor waiting in the wings, my lines memorized, my moment approaching. The tension in the car was thick, but it was all theirs. I was floating above it, buoyed by the secret I held. We arrived at the stadium, a massive bowl of concrete and steel already buzzing with thousands of people. The air was electric with excitement. Okay, you two go on, my father said, shooing us toward the graduate entrance. We'll find seats down front. We'll be watching for you, Bella. He gave her a final, proud hug. He patted my shoulder, an afterthought. Good luck, Chloe. Bella and I walked together for a moment before the paths diverged. She went toward the general seating for the arts and sciences graduates. I followed the signs for platform party and honor recipients, heading to a special reserved section right at the front, just to the side of the stage. As I took my seat among the other summa cum laude graduates and award winners, I saw Dr. Sharma already seated with the rest of the faculty. She caught my eye and gave me a single firm nod. You've got this. It was all the encouragement I needed. The ceremony began. The procession of robed faculty, the national anthem, the interminable opening remarks from the university president. I scanned the crowd and found my family easily. They were, as promised, about 15 rows up from the field, perfectly positioned. My father held his phone up, ready to record. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a tissue already. The drone of the announcer reading names began. It went on for over an hour, a river of humanity flowing across the stage. Finally I heard it. Isabella Marie Matthews, Bachelor of Arts, cum laude. On the jumbotron I saw my parents leap to their feet. My father's phone was held high, and my mother was blowing kisses, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated joy. They were cheering, waving, the absolute picture of proud, loving parents. Bella, on the stage, beamed and waved back at them. It was their perfect moment, the climax of their story. I let them have it. I watched, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. The opening act was over. After the last graduate had crossed the stage, the university president returned to the podium. And now, he said, his voice echoing through the stadium, I invite Dean Wallace of the College of Arts and Sciences to the stage to present the final and most prestigious honor of the day. A hush fell over the crowd. Dean Wallace, a tall, imposing woman with a commanding presence, took his place. I felt a jolt of adrenaline, sharp and clean. This was it. Each year, the dean began, her voice rich and clear, the Chancellor's Award for Undergraduate Excellence is bestowed upon one graduating senior who not only exemplifies the highest ideals of academic achievement, but who has demonstrated extraordinary character, resilience, and perseverance in the face of profound adversity. I watched my family on the giant screen. They were listening politely, clapping at the appropriate times, still glowing from Bella's moment. This year's recipient, the dean continued, her eyes scanning the crowd, is a student who arrived at this university with nothing but their own intelligence and a ferocious will to succeed. This student, while maintaining a nearly perfect grade point average in one of our most demanding programs, worked multiple jobs, from waiting tables at dawn to shelving books at midnight, to fund their own education. I saw my father frown slightly. He exchanged a confused glance with my mother. A little murmur went through the crowd around them. The dean's voice grew stronger. This student did this without the traditional foundation of family financial support, facing daunting personal and economic obstacles alone. They did not simply survive their circumstances. They excelled because of them, turning their lived experience into the foundation of their scholarship. Now my parents were no longer looking at the stage. They were looking at each other, their faces etched with a dawning, horrified confusion. My mother's smile was gone, replaced by a pale, tight line. This scholarship reached its zenith this year, the dean boomed, her voice filled with pride, when this student, as a junior, became the first undergraduate in a decade to co-author a paper accepted for publication in the American Economic Review, our nation's most esteemed journal of economics. It was silent in my parents' section. The dots were connecting. The narrative they had so carefully constructed was being dismantled, piece by piece, in front of 20,000 people. My father's face, which had been beaming with pride just minutes before, had gone ashen. He slowly lowered his phone. The dean smiled. She did not just bloom in the rocky soil she was given. She transformed the entire landscape. It is my immense honor and a deep personal privilege to present the 2025 Chancellor's Award and its $25,000 prize to Ms. Chloe Ann Matthews. My name echoed through the stadium. For a second there was silence. Then the camera found me. My calm, composed face filled the jumbotron, right next to a split screen of my parents' frozen, shell-shocked horror. And then the applause began. It started in the front, with the faculty who knew the story, and it spread like a wildfire. It grew into a deafening, thunderous roar, a wave of sound and recognition and validation that washed over me. People were getting to their feet not just for me but for the story, for the miracle of the flower that grew in the rocks. I stood up, my legs steady, and walked toward the stage. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't have to. I could feel their stunned, uncomprehending gaze on me. Their perfect day, their perfect story, had just been incinerated in the bright, unforgiving light of the truth. My truth. The moment I stepped off the stage, medal in hand, the controlled calm I had maintained shattered, and the roaring chaos of the stadium flooded my senses. Graduates were hugging, parents were weeping, and the air was a thick soup of joy and relief. I was immediately swallowed by the crowd, a sea of black robes and beaming faces. I was looking for one face only, Dr. Sharma's. Before I could find her, two figures broke through the crowd, their movements frantic and desperate. It was my parents. Their faces were unrecognizable. My father's jovial, proud papa mask had melted into a blotchy, furious crimson. My mother's carefully applied makeup was streaked with tears of shame, not joy. They cornered me near a barricade, their bodies blocking any escape. "How could you?" my mother hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "How could you do that to us? In front of all those people. You made us look like monsters." The accusation was so breathtakingly self-centered I almost laughed. After everything, her first thought was of her own image. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father demanded, his voice trembling with a rage that barely masked his panic. "Why didn't you say you were having trouble? That you won all this stuff? We would have helped you. You made it look like we abandoned you." They didn't get it. They never would. They thought my success was a secret I had kept from them, when in reality it was a world I had built without them. They weren't a part of the narrative, so they couldn't comprehend it. Their absence was the foundation of the entire story. I looked from my mother's tear-streaked face to my father's apoplectic one. The old, familiar sting of their disapproval was gone. In its place was a vast, cold emptiness. I felt nothing for them but a distant, clinical pity. They were like characters in a book who had just realized they were the villains all along. "Tell you," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of 4 years of silence. "When have you ever listened? I tried to tell you 100 different times in 100 different ways. You just weren't interested in any story where Bella wasn't the hero. My father opened his mouth to retort, but no words came out. For the first time in my life, I had left him speechless. Chloe. A calm, firm voice cut through the tension. Dr. Sharma was there, standing just behind me. She placed a hand on my shoulder, a simple gesture of solidarity that felt more real and protective than any hug my mother had ever given me. Let's get out of here. Your friends are waiting. I looked at my parents one last time, at their stunned, broken faces. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. Felt nothing. I was already moving on. I turned my back on them and walked away with Dr. Sharma, leaving them standing alone in the cheering crowd, two ghosts at a celebration they had been invited to but could never truly attend. Later that afternoon, the joyful chaos had subsided, leaving only the quiet hum of finality. My dorm room, stripped bare of my life, echoed with every sound. The last of my possessions were packed into brown cardboard boxes sealed with tape. It was over. A soft knock came at the door. I expected one of my friends, but when I opened it, Bella stood there alone. Her white graduation dress was wrinkled, and her eyes were red and swollen. The perfect polished facade was gone, and the girl from the late-night drunken phone call stood before me. She didn't say anything at first, just looked around the empty room, at the boxes that represented a life I had lived completely parallel to hers. I knew, she whispered, her voice cracking. I waited, my arms crossed over my chest. Knew what, Bella? Everything, she said, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were filled with a shame so profound it was painful to look at. Well, not everything. Not about the big award. But I knew about the jobs. I knew you were struggling. I saw your name on the dean's list online every semester. I knew you were getting scholarships because sometimes the alumni magazine would list the recipients. She took a shaky breath. I saw it all and I said nothing. Every time Mom and Dad would brag about me, about their investment, a part of me would shrivel up inside. I wanted to scream. What about Chloe? Do you have any idea what she's doing? Why didn't you? Asked, my voice flat. It wasn't an accusation. It was a genuine question. Tears began to stream down her face. Because I was a coward, she said, the words raw and honest. And because I was selfish. I loved being the chosen one. I loved the praise and the attention. I was terrified that if I stood up for you they would stop. That the light would turn away from me. It was my job to be the perfect daughter, the successful investment, and I was so scared of getting fired. She sank onto the edge of my stripped mattress, her shoulders shaking. The whole time I was jealous of you. I know that sounds insane. But you were free. You were building your own life on your own terms. I was just living out the life they had designed for me, and I was suffocating. She looked up at me, her face a mess of regret. I'm so sorry, Chloe. I'm not apologizing for them. I don't know if they can even understand what they did. I'm sorry for me. For being a terrible sister. For being silent when I should have shouted. I listened to her confession, the anger I had held toward her for years slowly dissolving. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was something more complex. Understanding. Her gilded cage had been just as real as my struggle. We were both casualties of their narrative, just in different ways. I sat down on the mattress next to her, leaving a small space between us. I don't know what to do with that, Bella, I said honestly. But, thank you for saying it. It wasn't absolution. But it was a beginning. A tiny, fragile bridge built between our two separate worlds, constructed from the rubble of our family's lies. For the first time it felt like we might one day be able to cross it. I spent the first week of my postgraduate life in a small, furnished apartment I sublet near the campus. It was my first taste of true independence, and it was intoxicating. My phone, however, was a war zone, a direct line to the past I was trying to escape. The voicemails from my mother were arias of weeping self-pity. I don't understand why you're doing this to us, Chloe. We love you so much. How can you be so cruel? They were performances of a victimhood she felt she was owed. The texts from my father were different. They were clumsy attempts at corporate-style negotiation, as if our fractured relationship was a hostile takeover that could be resolved. Chloe, this has gone on long enough. I have transferred $100,000 to your bank account to cover your loans and expenses. Please acknowledge receipt. It was a bribe, a pathetic attempt to purchase my forgiveness and silence. I transferred the money right back. His texts grew more desperate. We need to talk this through as a family. There are two sides to every story. I read his words and felt a surge of power. He was wrong. Some stories only have one side. The truth. I ignored them all. I muted their numbers, deleted their messages, and refused to engage. Their panic was their own problem to solve. My life was finally my own, and I was busy living it. On Friday night, I used a small fraction of my prize money to take my real family out for a celebratory dinner. Dr. Sharma was there, along with the two friends from my economics program who had been my late-night study partners and confidants. We went to an expensive Italian restaurant, the kind I used to walk past, staring at the happy people inside, and ordered the best of everything. We didn't talk about my parents. We didn't talk about revenge. We drank expensive champagne and talked about the future. We argued about monetary policy, laughed about our shared academic struggles, and toasted our successes. Dr. Sharma told me about a PhD program at the University of Chicago that was perfect for me and promised to write a letter of recommendation that would make them beg you to attend. Sitting there, surrounded by the warmth of genuine friendship and intellectual respect, I felt richer than my father's desperate hush money could ever make me. These people were my found family, the greenhouse I had built for myself. The sound of our laughter filled the restaurant, and it was the sweetest victory I could have ever imagined. A month after graduation, after the dust had settled and the voicemails had dwindled, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived at my apartment. It was addressed in my mother's elegant looping script. My first instinct was to tear it up, to throw it away unopened. It felt like a final, desperate attempt to invade the peaceful new world I had built. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was the fragile truce I'd made with Bella, who had texted me a few times since our conversation. Perhaps it was just a weary curiosity. I slid it open with a kitchen knife. Inside was a multi-page letter, written on my mother's personalized stationery. It was co-signed in my father's blocky signature at the end. It was not like the texts or the voicemails. The performative, self-pitying tone was gone. In its place was a stilted, awkward, and profoundly shocking attempt at self-reflection. Began simply. Dear Chloe, we are writing to you because we owe you an apology. We were wrong. The letter clumsily tried to explain their reasoning, not as an excuse, but as a confession. They wrote about their own fears, about seeing Bella as a reflection of the easy success they'd always wanted, and seeing me as a reflection of the struggle they'd always feared. They had pushed Bella into the sun because they were afraid of the dark. We told ourselves it was for your own good, my mother had written. That we were teaching you resilience. We see now that was a lie we told ourselves to justify our own failure as parents. We saw your strength, and instead of nurturing it, we tested it until it almost broke. We did not give you the love you deserved. We are so sorry. I read the letter once, then twice. It was imperfect. It was 30 years too late. But it was the truth. Bella, in our brief texts, had mentioned she was talking to them. Really talking to them for the first time. This letter was clearly the result of those painful conversations. For days, the letter sat on my kitchen counter, a physical object representing an impossible choice. What did forgiveness mean? Did it mean pretending the last 4 years, the last 22 years, hadn't happened? Did it mean letting them back into my life, allowing their narrative to once again try to swallow mine? I realized, after much thought, that forgiveness wasn't for them. It wasn't about absolving their guilt. It was about my own freedom. Holding on to the anger was like carrying a bag of rocks, and I had been carrying it for so long, I had almost forgotten how heavy it was. I was ready to put it down. I sat at my laptop and composed a short email to my parents. Subject: your letter. I have received and read your letter. Thank you for your honesty. I will need time. Chloe. It was not an invitation. It was not absolution. It was a boundary, a line drawn in the sand. It was me, acknowledging their apology, and then choosing to prioritize my own healing over their need for a quick resolution. I hit send, and felt the weight in my chest lighten just a little. 1 year later, I was sitting in a bustling coffee shop in Hyde Park, a neighborhood in Chicago. The crisp autumn air swirled outside, but inside it was warm, filled with the smell of roasted coffee and the quiet murmur of intellectual debate. I was a first-year PhD candidate at the University of Chicago's Department of Economics, on a full fellowship. Dr. Sharma's recommendation had not, in fact, made them beg. But it had opened the door, and my own record had carried me the rest of the way. My life was full. It was full of challenging research, brilliant new colleagues, and the vibrant, endless possibility of the city. It was a life I owned completely. My phone buzzed with a FaceTime call. It was Bella. I smiled and answered. Her face popped up, bright and genuinely happy. She was in her own small apartment in a different city, having taken a job as an assistant curator at a small modern art gallery. "You will not believe the artist I just met," she gushed, and we fell into an easy, comfortable conversation, the kind of conversation I had once dreamed of having with a sister. We were still rebuilding, but the foundation was solid, built on the truth. After we hung up, I saw an email notification. It was from my mother. It wasn't demanding or pleading. The subject line just said, "Thought of you." Inside was a link to a recent article about a new microlending initiative for female entrepreneurs in developing countries. Below it, a simple line. "Fascinating application of economic principles. Hope you are well. Love, Mom." I looked at the email, a faint, bittersweet smile touching my lips. Our relationship was like that now. Quiet, distant, conducted through occasional articles and brief, polite updates. They were trying, in their own clumsy way, to learn my language. I didn't know if the deep wounds would ever fully close, or if they should. But the open, daily agony was gone. My revenge was complete. It wasn't the satisfying crash of their world I had once imagined. It was the quiet, steady hum of my own. My revenge was the PhD program, the friendship with my sister, the peace in my own apartment. It was a life so full of my own success and happiness that their approval, their money, their love, everything I had once thought I would die without, was now simply irrelevant. I took a sip of my coffee, turned my attention back to the book in front of me and got back to work. I was free. And that's how it ends. Not with a fiery explosion, but with the quiet, steady peace of a life I built for myself. I learned that the ultimate revenge isn't seeing your family's downfall. It's building a world so full of your own success and happiness that their validation becomes completely irrelevant. Thank you so much for following this journey with me. Now I have a big question for all of you, and I need you to be honest. When I received that final letter of apology, I chose a path of cautious forgiveness and firm boundaries. But I know for some, the damage would be too great to ever repair. So, I have to know, let me know in the comments. If this was your story, would you be on Team Forgiveness or Team Freedom? There's no wrong answer. Tell me which path you would have chosen and why. I can't wait to read your honest opinions on how you would have handled the end.